Launched around the third quarter of 2004, the Motorola Razr V3 was a mobile phone that in many ways changed the market and established Motorola as one of the leading telecommunication brands of the 2000s. From a sales perspective, the Razr V3 sold no less than 50 million units during the initial run, which was between 2004 and 2006. Afterwards, new models came to the market. The biggest thing that came with the Razr V3 was the slim form factor. The phone has a thickness of just 14 mm, and for that time, it was a big deal, especially since phones those days had removable batteries, a fully functional keyboard, and a flip body system. The design of the Razr V3 was and still is great. It's good to know that this mobile phone came in plenty of colors, and here is where things get confusing. You see, you had the black, silver and blue variants, and then you had other rarer variants such as yellow, red, pink, royal blue, green and purple, just to name a few. You also had spin-off variants of this phone based on movies, TV shows and brands. I also suspect that a few Razr V3 mobile phones were made especially for carriers and thus had their own unique colors and branding. In this review, I managed to score 3 Razr V3 mobile phones and a Razr V3i, the one being dark purple on the right. Finding these phones has proven to be tricky. Finding these phones in working condition and for cheap has proven to be tricky. A phone that is in pristine condition and has the original box plus its accessories can run you a lot, especially if it's a rare color. Going back to the design of these phones, it was certainly good and I can see why it sold so well. It somehow managed to make a phone look outstanding but practical at the same time. The keyboard has a brushed texture and that reflects light into a sunburst pattern. The keyboard was also fully illuminated in blue. The Razr V3 has a 2.2-inch TFT LCD display and that is as good as it sounds. Of course, it will not compete with today's screens, but by 2004 standards, this thing was neat. It has rich colors and it is responsive. However, given its size, the resolution is small at 176 by 220 pixels with a pixel density of 128. The Razr V3 also has a secondary screen located on the rear of the main cap. This screen is used to read the date and time as well as the color ID. This screen has a resolution of 96 by 80 pixels. One great thing about these phones is the fact that they use a mini USB connector for charging and data transfers. Why would be that great? Well, because back in 2004, the charging connector was basically the Wild West. Not only did each manufacturer had a proprietary connector, but phones that were part of the same series had proprietary chargers, which means that a charger from a phone did not work with another phone even though both phones were almost the same and released in a span of just a few months. On the bottom of the phone you had the microphone, which again, for the time being, it was quite good. The speakerphone is installed above the Motorola logo on the flip part of the casing. When we talk about the software, well again, it was the Wild West, with each manufacturer having a different take on their phone's software. In the case of the Razr V3, it is running a proprietary Motorola software that obviously is made specially for the Razr V3 series. By default, the phone has a few games installed among the basic apps, such as phone calls, text messages, the camera app and organizer. And yes, you could surf the wide web with this mobile phone and check your emails, but that was about it. In terms of the hardware, the Razr V3 offered an internal memory capacity of 5 MB and Bluetooth connectivity, the latter being a big deal in 2004 as more and more devices were starting to get Bluetooth compatible, cars especially. The camera of the Razr V3 was only VGA and the quality was pretty much 2004 style. Let me tell you something, we've come a long way in terms of mobile phone camera quality. The big fad about cameras on mobile phones around those days was that you could take a photo or a video and share it with others via text messages, and that's about it. Unless you are talking of course about using these phones to record UFOs. From a usage perspective, this phone can be used to make and receive phone calls, and that's about it. Sure, you might be able to go on the internet, but it is pretty hopeless in that regard. These phones are past their prime, but for the right price they can be a great thing to have around the house, especially if you've had one back in 2004. The ergonomics of the Razr V3 will put to shame some of the basic smartphones today, with a responsive keyboard with great tactile feedback and a solid feel, thanks to the metal keyboard and metal casings, something which some affordable smartphones do not have today, thanks to the overusage of plastics, glue and cheap materials. However, if you'll consider a Razr V3, you'll consider it for one single thing, the way it looks and the nostalgia of it. If you want one, make sure to have one with a battery that can actually hold a charge. And be aware, a lot of these phones were bought with a carrier lock, and unlocking them can be tricky. If you like this review, then you might consider subscribing for more, and also if you want to support me in a direct way, then in the description below you will find the links for both the Patreon and the subscriber starter pages of this channel.